It was late evening when the sky above the forest changed color. A bright flash of blue and silver streaked across the clouds like a falling star. But this was no star. It roared with power and fire, crashing through the trees and shaking the ground like thunder. Jake, a young hunter, was walking home with his dog Max. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the explosion far off near the mountains. He looked at Max, who was already growling and pulling on the leash. Something had fallen from the sky, and it was not normal. Jake had lived near these woods all his life. He knew every trail, every tree, every sound. But tonight everything felt wrong. Even the birds had gone quiet. He made his way through the forest quickly, holding his flashlight in one hand and his knife in the other. Max stayed close to his side, alert and silent. After walking for almost 20 minutes, they reached a clearing. There it was, a huge metal object half buried in the ground, glowing softly, steaming like a dying engine. It was a spaceship, but not like the ones in movies. This one was smooth, shaped like a silver leaf, with strange lights blinking slowly. One side was torn open. Metal bent like paper. Jake stepped closer. Heart beating fast, he heard a sound. A soft, weak voice, not human, not animal. It was coming from inside the broken ship. Jake climbed into the wreckage carefully. The air smelled like smoke and something he couldn't describe. Inside, wires hung like vines and strange symbols flashed across glowing screens. Then he saw her, a girl or something that looked like a girl, was lying on the floor. Her skin was light blue, almost glowing in the dark. Her hair was silver. Her eyes too big for her face. Blood, thick and purple, was running down her arm. Jake froze. She looked scared, shaking, barely breathing when she saw him. She whispered something in a language he didn't understand. Then she switched to broken English. They left. They left me. They say humans. Dangerous, she said. Jake knelt beside her, trying to calm her. I won't hurt you, he said softly. But she was losing strength fast. With the last of her energy, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small glowing device. She placed it in Jake's hand. They come, they kill all. You must hide, she whispered. Then her eyes closed and she went still. Jake's heart pounded. Who was she? Why did her people leave her? And who was coming? He lifted her gently. Surprised at how light she was, she didn't seem dangerous, just hurt and scared. He carried her out of the ship and back into the woods. Behind him, the lights on the broken ship began to fade. But above him in the night sky, another light appeared. A dark shape moved between the stars. Silent and cold, it was another ship. But this one was not crashing. Max growled low, his ears flat. Jake looked up. Gripping the strange device in his hand, something was coming, something not human. He didn't know what this alien girl had done. He didn't know why her own kind had left her. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave her to die, not here, not like this. Jake ran through the trees, holding her close. The wind whispered through the branches and the stars watched from above. He had no plan, no answers, and no backup. But he had heart. And for now that was enough. Far above the earth, a cold voice echoed in a hidden control room. Target located. Begin ground scan. The hunters had arrived, and Earth was about to become a battlefield. Jake pushed open the old wooden door of his cabin. It creaked like always, but tonight it sounded louder, heavier. He rushed inside, still carrying the strange alien girl in his arms. Max followed, ears up, eyes alert, tail stiff. He laid her gently on the couch and checked if she was still breathing. Her chest moved slowly, her skin looked pale, like moonlight fading. She was burning up, her body shaking with fever. Jake grabbed a clean towel and dipped it in cold water. Hang on, he whispered, even though he wasn't sure she could hear. He didn't know what kind of blood she had or what her bones were made of. But he knew pain when he saw it, and she was in a lot of it. He placed the wet towel on her head and opened a first aid box. Nothing in it was made for aliens, but he had to try. He cleaned the purple blood from her arm, wrapped it gently. She flinched once, then went still. Suddenly, her eyes opened, those deep silver eyes full of fear. She looked around wildly and tried to sit up. Jake held up his hands. No, it's okay. You're safe here, he said softly. She didn't understand all the words, but she felt the kindness in his voice. Her breathing slowed a little. Then she looked at him, eyes wide, and spoke again in broken English. They leave me. I was weak. Jake didn't know what to say. He had seen animals leave the weakest behind, but people, even alien people. She continued, voice shaking. Captain say, Earth is savage. No hope here. So leave me to die, Jake frowned. Savage, huh, he muttered. He looked around his simple wooden cabin. No fancy machines. No space tech, just a fire, some tools and shelves filled with books. He stood and made some warm soup on the stove. The smell filled the cabin slowly, chicken and herbs. The alien girl sniffed the air, confused, curious. Jake brought the bowl close and offered it to her. She stared at it for a moment, then dipped her fingers in. She tasted it carefully, then took the spoon and ate slowly. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked less afraid. What's your name? Jake asked. She paused, then pointed to herself. Nara, she said. Jake nodded. I'm Jake. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, a fire crackled in the fireplace. Max lay near Nara's feet, still watching her closely. Jake finally asked, Why were you even here? Nara. She looked at the fire, then spoke slowly. Test mission. First contact. Not peaceful. My people study weak planets. Decide if worth saving. Jake's face turned serious. Did they think we weren't worth saving? Nara nodded slowly. Too wild. Too emotional. Too dangerous, she said. Jake let out a bitter laugh. And yet, here I am, patching you up in my little savage cabin. Nara looked at him quietly. Then she said something unexpected. You, different, you stay. They run suddenly, Max barked loud and sharp. Jake stood up alert. Nara grabbed his arm, eyes wide again. They find me, she whispered. They come to finish. Jake grabbed his flashlight and a hunting rifle from behind the door. Outside, the forest was dark. Too quiet. Something was out there watching, waiting. He turned off the cabin lights and peeked through the window. Far in the trees, small red lights blinked in a straight line. Not animals, not hunters, machines, they track me. Through blood. Through Chip, Nara said. She pulled up her sleeve and showed him a small glowing spot under her skin. They control all soldiers. I was not soldier, just scout. But they track all. Jake had seen enough. He grabbed a small hunting knife and sat down beside her. Then we take it out, he said. Nara's eyes widened, but she nodded. The procedure was fast and quiet. Jake worked carefully, using alcohol and a steady hand. Soon the chip was out, small. Blinking red, he crushed it under his boot. And the light went dark. Nara smiled weakly. Free now, she whispered. Jake helped her lie back down. You rest now, Nara, he said. They'll come. But they'll find nothing. He looked out the window again. The blinking lights had stopped. For now they were safe. But Jake knew this wasn't over. They had come once. And they would come again, and next time, they wouldn't be searching, they'd be hunting. The night sky above the forest was not silent anymore. Something heavy moved through the clouds, humming like thunder trapped inside metal. Jake stood outside his cabin, rifle in hand, staring up. A storm of lights was descending, red, sharp, and unnatural. Beside him, Nara watched with wide, glowing eyes. Her silver hair moved with the cold wind, her face pale with fear. They hear, she whispered. They come to erase. Jake didn't ask who they were. He could already tell they weren't here to talk. The first ship broke through the clouds, silent as a shadow. It didn't crash like Nara's, it landed perfectly. Smooth and cold, the trees shook from the shockwave, and birds exploded into the night sky. Max barked once, then growled low. Sensing danger all around, Jake grabbed Nara's arm. We need to move, he said. She nodded. Her eyes glowing faintly in the dark, they ran into the forest, feet silent on the wet ground. Behind them, the air filled with strange sounds, mechanical voices, scanning beams, metallic footsteps. The hunters were here, not human soldiers, but tall, armored beings, faces hidden behind silver masks. Their weapons hummed with blue energy, slicing through trees like paper. One of them spoke in a strange language. Nara froze for a second, recognizing it. They send execution team, she said quietly. No rescue. Only erase. Jake looked around, thinking fast. He knew this forest better than anyone. It was his home. He led Nara through a narrow trail between rocks. Hidden by ferns, follow me and don't stop, he said. As they moved deeper, the forest began to fight back in its own way. Branches snapped under the weight of alien machines. Roots tripped the hunters as they scanned for life signs. But they kept coming, slow and unstoppable. Jake reached an old hunting post he had built years ago, a small wooden platform high in the trees. He helped Nara climb up and covered the trail below with fallen leaves. From above they could see everything, the burning glow of the ship, the shadows moving through the trees. Nara touched her wound, wincing. They track by energy too, she said, my blood different. Maybe they sense it. Jake looked at the forest floor, then at the glowing blood on her bandage. He quickly tore off the cloth and threw it far into the bushes. Seconds later, a blue beam shot down from the sky, vaporizing that spot. They found it fast, Jake muttered. Nara looked at him with gratitude and fear mixed in her eyes. Why you help me, she asked softly. Jake didn't look at her. Because it's right, he said simply, and because I don't leave people behind. The sound of metal boots echoed closer. The hunters moved in formation, scanning, searching, killing. Jake and Nara stayed perfectly still. One wrong sound and they would be found. Suddenly, Max barked again from the distance. He had stayed behind, guarding the cabin. The aliens turned toward the sound. Jake's heart dropped. Max, no, he whispered. Blasts of blue light lit up the forest. The sound of breaking wood, the smell of smoke, then silence. Nara looked at Jake and saw the pain in his eyes. He had lost more than a pet. He had lost his last family. Before she could speak, Jake jumped down from the platform. We're not running anymore, he said. Nara grabbed his arm. They too strong, she warned. Then we fight smart, Jake replied. His voice steady but cold. They moved through the trees, setting traps with ropes, spikes, and fire. Jake used what he knew, human tricks, not alien tech. He made decoys using heat from burning logs to confuse scanners. Every step he took, he thought of Max, of Earth, of home. When the hunters reached the trap zone, the forest exploded with chaos. Flames, smoke, and falling logs. The aliens fired wildly, cutting trees instead of targets. Jake used the confusion to strike from the shadows one by one. They fell, surprised that a savage human could fight like this. Nara joined him, using what power she had left. Her wrist device glowed as she hacked one of their drones, turning it against them. For a moment, it felt like they could win until the sky opened again. A massive ship appeared, 10 times larger than the others. Its light was blinding, its voice booming across the valley. Return the subject, or face planetary cleansing, it said in perfect English. Nara's hands trembled. That voice. Commander, she whispered. He not forgive failure. Jake looked at the sky, then back at her. Then he's gonna learn what humans do when someone threatens their planet, he said. He loaded his rifle, his face set with calm fire. Nara stared at him in silence, realizing something strange. These humans, these so-called savages, they didn't run from fear. They ran toward it high above. The commander's ship began to charge a weapon. The forest glowed with blue light. Jake raised his rifle toward the sky and whispered one word. Come and try. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet, smoke floated between the trees. Glowing blue under the moonlight, the alien hunters were gone. For now. But Jake knew silence like this never lasted long. He led Nara through the woods until they reached an old abandoned mine. Rusty rails disappeared into the dark. This place safe, Jake said. No one comes here anymore. Nara looked around nervously. Her silver eyes shining faintly, they stepped inside, the cold air smelling of iron and dust. Jake found an old lantern and lit it. The soft light painted their faces in gold and shadow. For a moment it almost felt peaceful. Nara sat against a rock, breathing heavily. Her wound had opened again, purple blood soaking through the bandage. Jake frowned, pulling his bag closer. He tried to clean it, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Something was wrong. Her blood wasn't acting like normal blood, it pulsed. Glowing faintly under the skin, Jake leaned closer, confused. He saw small lights moving beneath the surface like tiny machines. What is this? He whispered. Nara looked away. Not supposed to see, she said softly. They say, classified. Jake didn't care. Tell me, Nara, what did they do to you? She stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, "I'm not born. I'm made." Jake froze. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "They create me in lab, half living, half machine, to survive any world." She touched her arm where the skin shimmered faintly like metal. "My people, they fear emotion. They remove it from soldiers. But something in me changed." Her voice broke. "I feel fear, pain, even kindness. They call it error." Jake looked at her in disbelief. "So they left you because you were too human?" Nara nodded slowly, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "They say emotion weakness, but I think maybe it's strength." He said nothing for a moment, just stared at the strange patterns under her skin. He had seen war scars before, but nothing like this. He reached out and touched her arm gently. Her skin felt warm, alive, trembling under his hand. "We'll fix this," he said, "whatever they did. We'll find a way to stop it." She looked at him, hope flickering faintly. "You don't know what you say," she whispered. "Inside me." "Control core. If they activate, I become weapon." Jake's hand tightened around his rifle. "You mean they can use you to kill?" She nodded slowly. "If signal reach me, I destroy everything. Even you." He stood and paced the small cave. Outside, the wind howled through the rocks. "Then we find that control," he said. "We find it and take it out." Nara looked at him, fear and trust mixing in her expression. She opened a small panel on her wrist device. Holographic lines floated in the air, symbols, codes, and strange maps. Jake couldn't understand them, but Nara did. She pointed at one glowing mark near her chest. "There. Under heart. Energy core and control chip together." Jake frowned. "That's close to the heart. I don't know if I can—" "You can," she interrupted. "Better die free than live as weapon." The air grew colder. Jake took a deep breath and unrolled his small toolkit. He wasn't a doctor, but he was careful, calm. He cut gently where she pointed, and she didn't scream. Her hand just squeezed his arm, holding on like her life depended on it. Inside, under her skin, he saw it, a glowing crystal device beating like a second heart. It flashed red once, then blue, as if fighting itself. Jake used his knife to loosen it the moment it came free. A pulse of energy burst through the cave. The lights flickered, the ground shook, and a faint voice echoed in the air. "Unauthorized removal detected." "Activating failsafe," Nara gasped, clutching her chest. "Destroy it," she said. "Now!" Jake threw it to the ground and smashed it with a rock. The light shattered into dust, fading away like fireflies in the wind, then silence. Only their breathing filled the air. Nara slumped forward, exhausted but alive. Jake wrapped her in his jacket. "It's done," he said softly. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faint silver. "No," she whispered. "Not done." "They know now. They come again." Jake looked toward the cave entrance. The sky outside was glowing red. Not from dawn, but from fire. He picked up his rifle. "Then we make them regret ever coming to this planet," he said. Nara looked at him, her expression changing. For the first time since she crashed, she smiled. "You strange." "Jake," she said, voice weak but steady. "You not fear death?" Jake smiled back faintly. "Fear comes later," he said. "Right now, I've got work to do outside." Thunder rolled, not from weather, but engines. Ships were moving in the sky again. The hunters had found their trail, and this time they weren't alone. The red sky burned above the forest like a warning. Ships hovered in the clouds, silent shadows with deadly purpose. Jake and Nara stood at the entrance of the mine, watching, waiting, breathing smoke and fear. "They know we're alive," Jake said quietly. "They know I'm free," Nara replied. Her voice low but clear. They had destroyed the control chip. She was no longer their weapon, no longer a silent tool. Now she was a threat, and threats were hunted. "They will wipe Earth clean if they must," Nara said, "to hide me. To hide truth." Jake looked up at the glowing ships. "Then we don't just run anymore," he said. "We tell the galaxy what they did." He led her to an old ranger station deep in the woods. It had been abandoned for years, but it had something valuable. A high-range radio dish, cracked and covered in vines, but maybe still strong enough to reach the sky. Nara sat at the dusty control panel, her fingers moving over the wires and switches. She connected her wrist device to the system, and the machine came to life with a soft hum. Lights flickered, then glowed steady. Jake looked at the screen full of alien symbols. "You really think someone out there will listen?" he asked. "Someone always listens," Nara said. Even when others try to silence, she began recording, her voice calm but full of power. "This is Nara, former scout of the Kareen Empire," she said. "I was created, trained, and almost destroyed by my own people. They said Earth was savage," she continued. "But humans showed me kindness, not cruelty." As she spoke, the system transmitted her message through waves of light and code. It reached far beyond Earth towards satellites, broken probes, and maybe other civilizations. A warning, a truth, a spark. Jake watched her, feeling something strange. He didn't understand her language, but he understood her heart. She was no longer just an alien girl. She was a fighter. A voice the stars couldn't ignore. Suddenly, the screen flashed red. "Transmission detected," Nara said. "They hear us." "They try to block." Jake grabbed his rifle. "Then I'll buy you time," he said outside. The trees shook as small alien dropships landed. Six-legged machines marched through the woods, scanning for heat, life, resistance. Their weapons glowed like blue fire, cutting through trees and stone. Jake ran outside and activated the old motion sensors around the station. Booby traps lit up, swinging logs, firebombs, spikes made from scrap metal. One by one, the machines fell into chaos. But they kept coming, smarter now, faster. Jake ducked behind a fallen tree and fired shot after shot. Each one slowed them but didn't stop them. Inside, Nara worked faster, sweat on her brow. "If I reroute signal through their own satellite," she muttered, "I can blast the truth into every Kareen network." She rewired the cables. Sparks flying. The signal grew louder, brighter, harder to stop. A robot burst through the station window, metal claws raised. Nara turned and used her wrist device to send an energy pulse. The robot froze, shook violently, and exploded in pieces. Jake burst back in, clothes burned, hands bleeding. "They're everywhere," he said. "How much longer?" Nara looked up. "Almost done. Few more seconds outside." A new sound filled the air. A deep, monstrous hum. Like thunder trapped in a metal heart, a large ship was descending, black, smooth, with a symbol that glowed like fire. Nara's eyes widened. "That is the Emperor's judgment ship," she whispered. "If he's here, he plans to end everything." Jake stood beside her, chest rising with each breath. "Then we finish this now," he said. He handed her a small power core from one of the downed machines. "Use this. Boost your signal." She connected it to the system. The console lit up bright white. Her voice echoed again, louder this time, stronger. "This is not just a warning," she said. "This is a truth they want to bury. Earth is not savage. It is brave. Humans do not abandon the weak. They protect them." The message burst through the system like a flare. It went up into space, past satellites, through wormholes. It reached places the Kareen Empire thought they controlled. And then, it was out of their hands. The giant ship above paused. A signal reached it from somewhere far away. Other voices began to rise, other species, other watchers, asking questions, breaking silence. The Emperor's ship did not fire. Instead, it hovered, waiting, watching, and then it vanished, pulled back into the clouds. Inside the station, Nara slumped to the ground, exhausted. Jake knelt beside her. "You did it," he said. Nara looked at him and whispered, "No, we did." Outside, the forest was quiet once more. But the stars above were no longer blind. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows. It had become a war zone. Smoke curled between the branches. Fire crackled in the distance. The earth trembled beneath metal boots and falling machines. Jake wiped the blood from his face. His clothes were torn, his arms covered in dirt and burns. He looked at Nara, still weak. But standing, she was no longer afraid. "The message went out," she said. "But that doesn't mean they'll stop." Jake nodded, loading the last rounds into his rifle. "They'll try to silence us before others answer." A cold wind swept through the trees. With it came the sound of engines. Heavy, deep, unforgiving. The enemy was coming again. This time, with everything they had, Jake and Nara stood near the edge of the woods. Facing an open field, they had set traps, rigged explosives, and dug trenches. Behind them stood people. Dozens of humans from nearby villages. Hunters, farmers, and mechanics, not soldiers. Not trained, but ready. They came for your world too, Jake said to them. They called us savages. Unworthy. He looked at the people behind him and smiled. Let's show them what savage really means. The humans cheered quietly. Hearts full of fire, they had seen the ships fall from the sky. They had seen the strange girl who was not one of them, yet stood with them. And that was enough. Nara took a deep breath and walked to the front. She activated her wrist device, sending a pulse through the ground. The traps were ready. The defense line was set, then the sky opened. Dozens of dropships descended like metal wolves. Alien soldiers marched out, perfect in line. Eyes behind masks, above them the Emperor's voice echoed once more. You were warned, Earth, he said. Now you will be erased. But this time, Earth did not run, this time. Earth stood its ground, the first wave came fast. Energy blasts tore through trees. Explosions rocked the field, but the traps worked. Flames erupted from the ground. Wires snapped tight around metal legs. Machines fell, confused by human tricks. Jake led the front line, firing shot after shot. He didn't fight with advanced weapons. He fought with grit, rage, and the will to protect. Behind him, others followed, fearless in the face of death. Nara moved like light between the trees. Her body burned with energy, her eyes glowing bright. She used her wrist device to overload enemy weapons. She hacked drones mid-air and turned them against their own. Still, the enemy pushed forward, stronger, colder, endless. The humans fell back to the second line, but they didn't break. Jake saw a giant machine march through the smoke, 10 feet tall. With blades for arms, he grabbed a grenade and ran straight at it. The explosion knocked him back, but the machine fell. Burning, he coughed, smiled, and stood again from above. A new ship descended. Sleek and silent, it opened slowly, revealing a figure dressed in black and silver. The Emperor himself had arrived. Tall, armored, face hidden behind a smooth mask. He stepped into the battlefield as if nothing could touch him. His voice cut through the chaos. Return the girl, he said, or your planet will burn forever. Nara stepped forward, her hair blowing in the wind. I am not yours, she said. I am not your weapon. She raised her hand, and her body lit up with the last of her power. The Emperor raised his arm, and a beam of dark energy shot toward her. Jake dove in front of her without thinking. The blast struck his side. He screamed and fell. Nara cried out, running to him. He was bleeding, breathing, but barely. His eyes locked onto hers. End it, he whispered. No more running. Nara turned slowly, rage building in her chest. She tapped into the last code buried in her DNA, the one she was never meant to use. A blast of light exploded from her body, shaking the earth. The Emperor's systems began to fail, his armor cracking. The humans watched as the sky lit up with silver flames. Nara floated in the air, power pulsing from her like a heartbeat. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was the voice of a broken empire. Screaming back with one final pulse, the Emperor's ship shattered. His body collapsed, motionless. The remaining soldiers froze, disconnected from command, and then they vanished, pulled back into the sky. Defeated, silence fell. The battlefield was smoke, fire and ash. Nara landed beside Jake. Falling to her knees, she pressed her hands to his chest, crying softly. You saved me, she whispered. Jake opened his eyes slowly. No, he said weakly. You saved us. Behind them, the humans cheered. Not loud, not wild, but strong. A sound that reached into the sky and told the stars that Earth was still standing. The battle was over. Smoke drifted through the trees like fading memories. Broken machines lay scattered across the field, silent and useless in the sky. Once filled with fire and metal, was now clear again. Nara knelt beside Jake in the soft grass. His eyes were closed, his chest rising slowly. His wounds were deep, but he was alive. She pressed her forehead gently to his, her silver hair falling over his face. You are not savage, she whispered. You are something more. The other humans gathered around them, silent, tired, covered in ash and blood. They had fought for a girl from the stars, Not because she looked like them, not because she was powerful, but because she needed help. They carried Jake back to the village. The same village that had once feared strangers, now welcomed one as their own. Nara walked through the streets slowly. Children peeked from doorways. Curious but smiling, old farmers nodded at her. Their eyes full of respect. She was no longer the alien girl. She was Nara, one of them. At Jake's cabin, the fire burned low. She sat beside him every night, watching him sleep. Sometimes she read his books. Sometimes she just stared at the stars, waiting, thinking, feeling. One night, he opened his eyes and smiled weakly. "Took them long enough to fix me," he joked. Nara laughed, the sound soft and warm. "You hard to kill," she said, "even for human." He sat up slowly, groaning. "Did we win?" he asked. Nara looked out the window, where the stars blinked like quiet witnesses. "We did more than win," she said. "We woke up the galaxy." Her message had spread far beyond what anyone expected. Other species had heard it, some scared, some angry, but many inspired. A voice from Earth, a voice of hope. The Korean Empire could not silence it. Ships had stopped circling the planet. Peace was not promised, but war was no longer certain. And all across Earth, people had begun to wonder, not about aliens, but about themselves. Jake stood outside weeks later. Leaning on a cane, the trees were green again. The ground healing. Max's old collar hung from the porch. A quiet reminder of what was lost. Nara joined him. Wearing a handmade jacket and old boots, she had learned to plant seeds, cut wood, and fix tools. She had laughed, cried, and even danced under the stars with the villagers. She was no longer learning how to survive. She was learning how to live. "Do you ever want to go back?" Jake asked one evening. She shook her head slowly. "I never had home there," she said. "Here, I have more than home." They stood in silence for a while. The wind whispered through the trees. The stars above seemed a little closer now. Not as strangers, but as old friends. Watching quietly in the center of the village, the people built a tower, not a weapon, not a monument of war, but a signal tower. One Nara helped design. A way to send truth to the stars always, so no one else would be left behind again. She became something of a legend, not because she fought, but because she stayed. She helped build a new path between worlds, one where kindness was stronger than orders and loyalty stronger than fear. Some called her the alien girl who turned against her own kind. Others called her a symbol of peace, but to Jake, and to the people who stood beside her, she was just Nara. Years passed, and the forest grew full again. Jake planted a tree where the last battle was fought. Under it, a plaque read, "To those who came from the stars and chose to stay." One day, a child from the village asked Nara, "Why did your people leave you behind?" She smiled softly and replied, "They were afraid of feeling." "Are you afraid now?" the child asked. She shook her head. "No," she said, "because I feel everything." And in that moment, she knew something deeper than all science. She had not just found safety, she had found belonging. Not because she was perfect, but because someone looked at her and said, "I will not leave you behind." In the end, she was not the girl they abandoned. She was the girl Earth chose to save. Not because it had to, but because that's what humans do. They don't always understand. They don't always trust, but when they choose you forever. She belonged here now. Not as a guest, not as a weapon, but as one of them.